Hey friend, I'm Danielle Damrell, and I am so grateful that you're listening to the Created Worthy podcast. This show is all about honoring the life stories of women from different ages, beliefs, backgrounds, and experiences. Everyone's got a story, and instead of getting stuck in the trap of unworthiness, this is a safe place for stories to be shared. On this show, we chat about the transformative power of creative processing too, and how we can utilize our God-given creativity with intention to heal, grow, find joy, create simplicity in the midst of our chaotic lives. So pull up a seat at our table because we are all created worthy. Hello, welcome back to the Created Worthy podcast. Today, I am joined by another worthy warrior, Elisa Fucci. Elisa is a motivational speaker, podcaster, and international best-selling author, relationship life coach, and certified breathwork detox facilitator. Elisa works with women to support them to break through painful relationship patterns, heal their hearts, learn communication skills, and find strategies to reconnect and build relationship resilience. Elisa became a certified life coach in 2021 through the Life Coaching School. She's become an international bestseller with her new book, Unleash Her. She hosts a podcast called The Elisa Fucci Show because although they say relationships are just hard, it doesn't have to be this way. She has created events and workshops to teach women to tap into their inner wisdom, let go of limiting beliefs, find their voice, learn to process their emotions, and how to drop expectations to start enjoying their relationships today. Elisa, thank you so much for joining us today on the Created Worthy podcast. I can't wait to hear more about your real life story.
Oh, thank you again for having me. And thank you, everyone who's listening. I hope to share through my experience give you hope and give you that little glimpse of light at the end of the tunnel, because I believe that if I have endured what I have endured, anyone can. Let me take you back to my childhood, right?
Yes,
Should we start there?
Let's start there. Start with telling us just a little bit about where you're from and what life was like growing up for you.
Ooh, I would love to take you there. So I am originally from Argentina, hence the little accent in there. I come from a family of 8. I'm the 7th of 8 kids. So big family. I loved it. You know, I had my days growing up where I hated being in a big family, but for the majority, I loved it. Growing up in Argentina was not like most people think. And I come from a background where my parents were successful when I was little, but then because of the economy, because of their decisions, right? As adults, we have decisions, and it didn't work out for us. And we got to the point where for me, we didn't have food. We had to maybe a bag of potatoes for the whole month to feed an entire family. I had to wear shoes that were maybe a size bigger, 2 size bigger, with a hole on the top. I had to wear clothes that were hand-me-down. And this is what I grew up with. This is what for me was normal. I didn't have dreams. As a child, I was in survival mode. And up until maybe a few years, I still was in survival mode because that's all I knew. I didn't know how to dream because my mom was a victim of physical, sexual, and verbal abuse. And that victim mentality she brought with it to our raising, our upbringing. So for me, it was always the victim mentality. And it's something that I teach my clients now to get out of. And even then, that's my comfort zone, right? Because I grew up from such upbringings where I didn't have it all. I didn't have anything, right? Sometimes we didn't have light and we had to have candles. And as a kid, I'll admit it sounded fun. As a kid, it was fun.
Yeah.
Now that I look back, I realize, okay, that was,
Yeah. You just made it into a game. I'm sure you didn't know any different.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It was hard. And a few years later, after trying everything, my parents decided, let's go to the US. Where there's better possibilities, let's go in search of the American dream.
Mm.
And it was hard because my parents had to move here and leave all of us scattered with relatives and friends. And I didn't have my parents for 3 months. And back then, you could only communicate with phone, right, with a phone call or letters, right? This was mid 90s, and calling long distance was freaking expensive. So we looked forward to the Sunday calls where my parents would call us. And that was all I had to hang on to. That and the idea of the US, the picture my parents had painted me of the green lawns and the picket fences and the smell and the food, right? And that's what I had to look forward to during those 3 months where my parents were here in the US trying to work to pay for the tickets for us to fly here. So for 3 months, we were living with relatives. And finally, on July 1996, I set foot in LAX in the US, and
what an airport
my life has changed. Yes.
Wow. Yes, what a culture shock, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, tell me
was.
a little bit about when you first got here. Where did you go? Did you guys have a house? Did you guys know where
No.
you were going to go next? No.
No, we kind of went from one house to another. And because we were a lot of us, it was hard for people to let us be there until we were able to afford a house. So the first 9 months were rough, especially because you think, okay, now I get to see my parents, but really I didn't. My parents had two jobs, and I was a preteen. I turned 12 right as soon as I got here. So I was a preteen, didn't know the language, didn't know the culture, didn't have the support. And that is when the severe depression kicked in. I didn't know that until later when I was 15 and I was diagnosed with it. But it was really hard for me to live, right? Like just have a normal teenage life under those circumstances. But it proves how resilient we are.
Yes.
And those were just the first incidents where my resiliency came in and kicked in, where I was able to make the best out of the circumstances. And it goes on to the next chapter, which led to a few years later, I found out I was pregnant out of wedlock. And
wow. How old were you?
I was 15.
15.
And
okay.
I found out, and I was like, I knew instantly what I needed to do, what I wanted to do, because I knew I was a child myself, and I didn't want my child to be raised by two different people, or by like the mom and dad in separate places. I wanted my child to have what I didn't have. I was like, I came here for the American dream, and I'm not going to be able to give that to this child. So I knew automatically, I knew what I needed to do. I knew that I needed to give this baby up for adoption and give him a life that I could not give. I knew I could give the miracle of life to a couple that couldn't have that for their own. And let me tell you that in my culture, that's a big no-no. You do not give away a family member. That's how they see it. It's like giving away a limb. So
Yeah.
I had resistance from my parents the entire time up until the day my son was born. They were like, we'll sign the court paper so you can marry this guy that was over the age of 21. Okay. That's how ridiculous the idea was. But
Yeah.
I knew through prayer, through following that intuition, following the spirit that we all have inside of us, I knew what I needed to do. And again, there's the resiliency factor that kicked in.
Yeah.
I knew what was best, and nobody was going to stop me. As hard as they tried,
Wow.
nobody was going to stop me. And
Eliza,
after,
I just have to
yeah,
stop you there real fast and just
yeah.
commend you for the courage that took. And I think that speaks a lot about your innate character, because at 15 years old, a lot of 15-year-olds aren't able to really make a decision like that from such a clear headed space, right? Like that's a very selfless decision. And I'm in shock that you were just so courageous and were able to still stand firm despite your family being like, no, you don't do this. This is not what we do in our culture. And yet you were able to do that. You were able to, I mean, I can't wait to hear the next part of your story, but it sounds like you were able to really make the best decision possible for your child at such a young age. So just want to commend you for that.
Thank you. Yes, I recently was able, through coaching, able to go back and realize like how strong that 15-year-old Elisa
Yes.
was. We seldom take the time to look at her accomplishments because we're so focused on the next best thing that we forget to celebrate those big milestones, how we got there, who we had to become to get there, the obstacles we had to overcome, and the characteristics and strengths we gained because of those circumstances. We forget that our past self is the warrior here because
Yes.
she had to go through all that crap so
Yeah.
we could be here and have the knowledge she gave us. So I realized just recently that because of her, I am a life coach, because she chose to take the hard way out. I mean, either way would have been hard. Raising a kid
Right.
at 15 is hard. Okay. But because I chose to be strong, and I chose to make that decision, I now can relate in so many levels with my clients because of what that 15-year-old self did for me and for all my clients, because I wouldn't be here
Yeah.
because if she wouldn't have made that decision. So
That
I
is
I do
That is
commend her.
just such, yes, we commend her. That is such a beautiful perspective. And I want to just talk about this for a minute, because I think I don't want anyone to miss how you're talking about your inner child. I think a lot of times when we talk about our inner child, we talk about the brokenness and the pain and the fear of
Mm,
our inner child. But what you're talking about is the courage and the resilience and the good from the inner child, from your own inner child,
yes.
and seeing that, and seeing not that you were just some innocent kid, right? Like sometimes in early childhood, especially when we're talking about inner child work, we're like, oh, but you were just a child, you were just an innocent little being. But rather you're like, no, I was a self-assured woman who hadn't grown into womanhood yet, right? Like you had,
Yes.
and you were forced into making a very adult decision um by getting pregnant. And that's not like I got pregnant at 19, so only 4 years later than you. So no judgment from me here, but I just can't I can't even believe how incredible it is and how healing it is, even just to me in this moment, to hear you talk and commend your own inner child instead of looking at her as somebody who was hurt and broken and scared. You're truly just loving her. You're approaching her with such just grace and true reflection. And that is such evidence of inner healing on your end. And also like the amount of strength that clearly is just an innate part of who you are. So thank you for that. Thank you
Yes.
for talking
No,
about your
thank
inner
you.
child and your past. It's not even your past. It's who you are still currently, but the younger version of who you are,
It
in such a
is.
beautiful way,
It
instead
is.
of in a way that is harmful.
And I mean, I have done so much inner work, and it is such a crucial part of what I help my clients with, because it is so important. How we act as adults is based on what we lived as children. So we repeat what happened to us during those early years of our lives. So unless we learn how to love that inner child and heal that inner child, we can never be emotional adults. We can actually be 50, 60, 70, 80 in age
Yeah.
physically, but mentally, we are still stuck as a
That
12-year-old, 9-year-old, wherever that trauma, that damage happened. We get stuck in those loops, and we
yeah.
bring it into every aspect of our lives. So for me, it has been a lot of inner child healing. Where, and for those of you that don't know, inner child healing is going back to where that belief originated by
Mhm.
tapping into your body. Whenever you're being triggered, that is your inner child tagging at you and saying, I need you to fix what I as a little child couldn't do. And I'm
Mhm.
like tearing up, because
I love it.
that's what it is. As children, we have all these big emotions, and we don't know how to handle them. And if big things happen to us, we don't know how to handle them, and we push it down in hopes that one day your adult self will take care of them and will heal them. But
Mhm.
seldom does that happen. All the trauma, all the things that happen to us, they get compounded, and we store it up in our bodies. And most of us don't deal with it until it explodes, until it comes out in addictions or divorce or something in some
Yeah,
other way.
even
Or, oh,
illnesses.
yes, yes. Emotions, when they're held in our bodies, they become toxic. Our bodies were meant to be
Literally.
vessels with
Hmm.
energy flowing in and out of us, not to be held in.
Yes.
So,
That that is a mic drop moment. That, oh my gosh. Yes, and amen. 100%. That was incredible. I am so grateful that you shared that, because that is such a beautiful way of explaining what inner child work is, but why it's important, more importantly. And again, I just keep thinking back to the way that you spoke about your inner child with such strength and dignity, giving her the dignity that she deserved to have when you were 15 years old and people were telling you to not make that decision. You still made that decision, and now you can approach and look back at her and say she had such dignity and courage to move forward and to do the thing that she was actually called to do. And that
yeah.
is like, I just am so grateful that you are on this podcast right now, because this is
Oh,
such a
I'm so
powerful
glad.
conversation. Let's go back into your story. So you decided to give your son, right, up for adoption. What did that look like? And what was your experience with that?
Oh boy, that I have a whole episode on inside my podcast
Oh,
walking
perfect.
people step by step what that looked like
Yes.
for
Well,
me
I will
as
link
I
that in the show
revisit it.
notes.
Yeah, and I also did a video in my Instagram where because I'll share I'll share why I did a reel. I'll share it with you guys, but first I'll tell
Yes.
you the story. So yes, I after I had picked a couple that I felt, I mean, imagine I had a stock of couples that were wanting a baby for years
Mm,
and years. Can you imagine how hard it is? The
yeah.
pressure of deciding who will get a child. They all looked perfect. They all
Mhm.
were like amazing. They all wanted it
Yeah.
so desperately. And they were all loving and wanting to welcome this baby. And it was really hard. It took a lot of prayer and
Mhm.
being on my knees on the floor praying desperately to know who the right couple was for
Mhm.
my son and for me, because we are eternally connected, I believe.
Yeah, for
um
sure.
so once I had decided, I met them, and it was an amazing experience. 2 days after I gave birth, I walked to the agency, to the adoption agency, and I was holding on so tight to this baby. If you can imagine, after giving birth, you have all your hormones. Again, I was at this age, at this time, I was already 16, but still a teen having a baby. I
Mhm.
mean, it was insane. My parents were trying to convince me not to, but here I was walking into the adoption agency, feeling hormonal with a baby, me being a baby, and all these thoughts and all everybody's input around me of what I should do. And the doubt crept in, and it
Mhm.
got bigger and bigger, and the the voices got louder and louder in my
So you
head.
had your son for 2 days before going.
Yes,
Wow, okay.
yes. And as the worker gave me the papers to sign, I couldn't sign.
Mm,
I was like, I can't. I could, but I can't. Like, I am
mhm,
not in the right mindset. I need to take some time to just think. And I handed the baby to my sister and said, you need to hold him because I I need to be alone and really come from certainty when I'm making this big decision. And that's why it's so important, I think, to know that as human beings, we can experience more than one emotion at the same time,
mhm,
but we have the choice which ones we focus on. We can have 90% doubt in our inside of us and 10% certainty. It is in the choosing where we put our focus on that matters, where our agency and our power lies. So I
mm,
chose to, even though I had all these fears, I wanted to focus on that certainty. I knew at one point that this was the right thing, and so I prayed and prayed until I just felt the peace that I needed to go back, sign the papers, and walk into the room and hand the baby to this couple and walk away. And I don't remember what happened. My sister told me that I fell to the ground and she had to take me into the elevator. Those 2 days are a blur because of how painful it
of
was.
course.
The first year was a blur, and all I could, if I could explain it, and I'm sure moms who have lost a baby or experienced miscarriage or have lost someone can understand this pain. It is a hole in your chest. It
Mm,
is a void. It is a black hole that no matter how long time passes by, it will always be there and nothing can replace it. Nothing can replace it. And you may forget momentarily, you may move on, but every anniversary, every little kid you see, every time you hear his name or something like that, it comes back and that wound opens back up.
Mm.
And fortunately, 21 years later, I was able to heal and close that wound because I got to meet him.
Oh my God. Wow. The redemption.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
And this is
Wow.
what I share on my Instagram. I had my friend record us when I went to pick him up at the airport, and I got to hug him after 21 years. And I got to kiss him and hold him and caress him and just feel him in my arms again and heal that. And after 21 years, I was able to close that wound. And I
Mm.
know a lot of women don't have that opportunity, but you will. I believe that you will, in the next life. That's my belief. But I was blessed to be able to have that in real life.
Yeah.
And now he
What a
gets to call
gift.
me Ma. And that is
Oh,
just I there's
wow.
no words to describe every time he
Yes.
calls me Ma, because I thought I had lost that privilege. And he's like, "No, you're my mom." What? No. I'm like, "Okay."
Oh my gosh. What a beautiful gift. Thank you so much for sharing that. Like, wow. I'm actually lost for words, which is hard for me as the queen of questions. So in those 21 years though, I'm sure a lot happened. Still, your life, didn't completely stop. I'm sure you didn't just spend those 21 years locked in a room somewhere.
No.
So yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit, like, did you go to college, or did you finished high school, I assume, or tell us a little bit about it.
Yes. So because I was pregnant during my junior year, I couldn't go to school. So I was determined to graduate with my class. And so I did 2 years. I did my junior and senior year all in one. So I took classes before, after school, on top of signing up to another school where I could do like what people would call now online. But
Okay.
I actually had like packets that I would have to go pick up to
Yeah.
get credits from another school to make up for all the classes and all the credits. So I did graduate with my class of '02. And I was the first one in my family to graduate here in the US.
Wow.
So, and actually graduate and get a diploma. So
Oh,
that was a big accomplishment. And I was determined to not be the minority, not to beat the statistics, and I proved that throughout my entire life, I think.
yeah.
And hence why I love to help women who feel hopeless and helpless, because I beat all the odds. So
Yeah.
can you.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that is what a so many good things. So many good things. So after you finished high school, what did you do next?
So after I finished high school, I started working. I wanted to go to school, but because I wasn't legal in the country,
Mm.
I couldn't back then. You couldn't go to school. So I was like, okay, I guess that's not for me. So I started working, and I met this guy, and we started dating, and I got pregnant. And I was like, well, here I am again. I guess I never learned. How many of you have felt that way,
Yeah.
making the same mistake over and over again, right? You feeling this like, am I never going to learn? Let me tell you that every time you make that mistake, you're learning something. And it doesn't matter how many times you need to leave the relationship, start back up on that addiction and go back and do all the same steps. It doesn't matter. You're learning something. And there is no written way anywhere, manual that says, if you're doing this, you need to only do it 3 times. 2 times, 10 times. There is no manual unless you have made it up, but just know that you made it up.
Yeah,
and you
that's
can
where I'm at.
delete it. You can delete it and just make your own rules.
Yeah.
And so just know, if you feel that way, and I know a lot of women are like, oh, but we keep getting into this cycle and keep making the same mistakes. I never learn. Be compassionate and loving towards yourself, because every time you're learning something, and it doesn't matter how, you need 20 times to learn what you need to learn.
Yes.
That's just your way. And it's a beautiful way of you. Okay. So I did not know that back then. I know this. So we decided to get married because I was like, I can't do this. Like I'm not going to live separate. So imagine getting married at 19, pregnant, and starting your marriage this way. Yeah, we had a blast. No, I'm kidding. It was it was the first 11 years of our marriage was a power struggle because we're so different. He's oil, I'm water. We were constantly butting heads, and I'm the strongest one in the relationship. So guess who wanted to win every argument? Guess who was always right? Guess who did all the work? Me, right?
Yeah, I relate.
That's where I found myself. And after 11 years, I gave my husband the ultimatum. I'm like, you either go to therapy or we're getting a divorce. And he's like, I don't need therapy. I'm fine. You're the problem. I'm fine. There's nothing wrong. If you guys heard this before, hang on, because let me keep telling the story. There's hope, guys. Okay.
Yes.
There's hope. Hang on. I'll get there.
Unfortunately, listeners, you are going to have to wait until next week to hear part 2 of Elisa's story. Thanks for listening and tuning in to the Created Worthy podcast. I hope that today's show resonated with you. And if it did, can you do me a huge favor and go leave a 5-star review? This helps more listeners find the show, and it expands the reach of the stories and concepts that are shared here. All the links and guest information are in the show notes. And if you're on social media, come hang out with me. You can find the Created Worthy podcast on both Instagram and Facebook, or come follow along with my personal IG page, where I just share more about the real, sometimes messy life of your fellow worthy warrior. Can't wait to talk to you soon, friend. And don't forget, we are all created worthy.